Okay. This is going to be quite the little morning, sounds like. We're going to go ahead and get started with the program. Again, welcome everybody to the Yosemite Gateway Partners meeting for January 13th. I would like to welcome you all, and particularly welcome our speakers, and of course, special our Yosemite National Park staff, Cicely and her professional crew. We are so glad that you're able to join us. And again, I think Chris had asked the question before, when are we going to be in person? And I think everybody pretty well can conclude their own assessment of that. It's all based upon health mandates and health restrictions and safety for people. But our hope is that we can be able to do it here relatively soon. So if you just please bear with us as we work through with the Yosemite National Park staff and Aramark in Yosemite, that would be greatly appreciated. So what I'm going to do is a great thank you to Jonathan Farrington. We had planned for something different for our January meeting, but that fell through relatively late in the process. And so Jonathan was quick to assemble a crew and get a great program put together. So I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Jeff. As Tony mentioned earlier, we had some internet issues at our office. In fact, we lost all internet. So I've quickly rushed to pull things together. I raced home a half an hour, and now I'm on my screaming fast 6 megabit connection here. So I'm going to turn my video off as I go through the introductions, and if you can bear with me, I actually have quite a bit to read and go through to introduce our 6 different panel speakers. So if you'll just sit back and relax, I'm going to cover what we're talking about today. So I'd like to thank YGP, we sent out a survey on suggestions on topics that could be discussed during these meetings. Most of the suggestions that came back were specific to the National Park Service, but one in particular did talk about the fact that you really have to get to Yosemite National Park, you have to go through public lands to get there. And so they encouraged us to include the Forest Service and public lands, and that's what we've done today. So what we're going to talk about today are the impacts on public lands due to COVID-19 during the past 2 years of the pandemic. We all know that despite the stay-at-home orders and closures, our remote regions and public lands experienced significant visitation. Many of the people coming to these areas had very little experience or knowledge of how to interact with these unimproved areas. So this morning we have a great group of public land managers that are going to talk about these challenges, how decisions were made, and then how we recover and continue to recover. So the first part of the panel discussion, we're going to talk about the impacts on public lands, changes in use patterns, challenges land managers had to navigate. We'll take a break, and Diana, who introduced herself, in the middle of this discussion, we're going to shift to a presentation from Recreate Responsibly Coalition California on how this group of volunteers came together, organized, and how concerned folks worked together to support public lands, discussing solutions and education efforts that were created and shareable assets. The final part of the discussion will wrap up and continue the conversation on public education, how the public land managers adapted or continue to be challenged with staffing, funding, and capitalization needs, and then ultimately ways that we, the public, can support them. And if time allows, at the end of the panel discussion, we'll gladly take questions from all of you. So I'll quickly introduce our speakers today. First, we have David Greenwood, who's the Outdoor Recreation Planning and River Manager with the Bureau of Land Management. His responsibilities for management of BLM campgrounds below Bryceburg and management of Red Hills area critical environmental concern near Chinese Camp on Highway 120. David handles NEPA requirements for small projects in these 2 areas, commercial recreation, special recreation permits, and whitewater raft, such as whitewater rafting and adventure races. It's also responsible for noxious weed treatment, public content interpretation, trail maintenance. David's worked with BLM since 1999. He started as a seasonal river ranger, and in 2007 was promoted to outdoor recreation planner on site at Bryceburg. And he's avid outdoorsman. Jennifer, or Jen Christie, also joining us as a district ranger with the Sierra National Forest at Bass Lake Ranger Station, provides leadership and support to over 200 employees and manage a little over 600,000 acres of public land. Jen's been in position for 7 months, but with the Forest Service for 10 years and 20 years total federal service, including 5 years of service in the U.S. Army. Jen came to the Forest Service because she grew up recreating on national forest lands. She's passionate about the agency's mission to sustain the healthy diversity and productivity of the nation's forest grasslands and to meet the needs of present and future generations. Also, with the Sierra National Forest, Jody Nickerson Powell, who introduced herself, and maybe we'll meet her toddler. So she's the Forest Recreation Officer. Responsibilities include wilderness, off-highway vehicles, wild and scenic rivers, develop and disperse recreation special use programs. She has 5.5 years total and 2 years for the organizations and 16 years with federal service. Her background is in fire recreation management, environmental planning. Jody has a degree in geology and geography and a master's in natural resource management. Also joining us today, and I haven't had a chance to meet or speak with, is Kent Grisham, who's the San Joaquin Sector Superintendent, the Central Valley District for the California State Parks. The sector includes Fresno, Madera, and Mariposa counties, and the home, which are home to Millerton State Recreation Area, Mineral and Mining Museum. 12 years in his position and 25 years with state parks. And our local legend, Scott Getteman, is going to join us as well. He served as a park ranger and public affairs officer in Yosemite National Park for over 25 years now, headed towards 26 this April. Scott serves as the primary park spokesman to media, works with visitor and tourism bureaus, handles legislative affairs, special events, public outreach, and international affairs. Scott's a 31-year veteran of the National Park Service, previously served at Glen Canyon National Recreation Area and Rainbow Bridge National Monument, and is originally from California and Los Angeles area. And then in a few minutes, Dana Kelly, who introduced herself as well, is president of California Camp Now. It's an RV Park and Campground Alliance, and is representing Recreate Responsibly today. And her organization represents all California private RV and campgrounds. She's been 4 years with Camp Now, and 3 years as president. So Dana is the president and CEO and an advisor to the American Glamping Association, steering committee of Recreate Responsibly, is a Cal Travel board member, and is a member of the Government Relations Committee. As a leader of one of the nation's largest state RV associations, Dana is focused on supporting and promoting Camp Now member parks while also creating unity within the outdoor hospitality sector. So thank you for your time on that. And so we're going to jump into the panel discussion. And so we'll kind of kick that off by saying, I'd like to ask each of you to start by stating the size of the land area you're covering, the staffing in season and out of season. And in my short conversations with all of you, I found this to be really varied as far as the sometimes large land areas and smaller amounts of staffing, or the staffing surprised me at times. So maybe Jen, I'd ask you to start off for Sierra, and then we'll ask Kent, followed by David, and then Scott.
Okay, so the Sierra National Forest in total is approximately 1.3 million acres, and it's approximately split in half with the 2 districts. The San Joaquin River is essentially what splits the 2 districts. So I manage just approximately around 600,000 acres, just a little over. Staffing, out of season, we typically have around a little over 100 employees here on the district. And when we're fully staffed up in the summer with all of our fire folks, et cetera, I have over 200 employees.
And I had to do the math, Jen, and so 1.3 million acres is over 2,000 square miles. That's a lot of land coverage for 100 to 200 people.
It is. We definitely, as an agency, have kind of gotten down to just the bare minimum staffing that we're able to function with. So it is a big land area for the number of employees that we have.
Absolutely. Kent, assuming you've joined us?
Yeah, my sector encompasses about 12,500 acres, mostly at Millerton Lake. And then my staff, year-round permanent staff, is about 25 if fully staffed, which I never am all the way fully staffed. So maybe lucky to have 20 of 25 positions filled. And then we double that in the summer to about 50 employees total with seasonal employees.
Thank you. And David, assuming you've joined us too.
Good morning. Yeah, so I'm the local Bryceburg BLM staff person. And in Mariposa County, if we're fully staffed, we have 5 people in the summer. And that drops down to 1 person, myself, in the winter. And we really haven't been fully staffed for several years. Within our Motherlode field office, we have 30 people permanent and only a couple of seasonals who come on in the summer. Those will be river rangers, mostly a couple of techs. So we're never more than 40 people to manage all of the BLM land, which is essentially the low elevation public land between the South Yuba River by Grass Valley all the way down to here in Mariposa County. So here in Mariposa County, I probably manage 10,000 acres, but the vast majority of my time is right along the river below Bryceburg.
Thank you, David. And then, of course, Scott, to answer that question, obviously your visitation is probably quite a bit different. So although the staffing is going to be quite larger, you're managing 4 million or so visitors, give or take 100,000. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, give or take. And acreage, you didn't ask me, Jonathan, I think it's about 757,000 acres, if I'm correct on the acreage. And then employees, we're plus or minus about 500 National Park Service employees. And then, of course, that adds to seasonals. We're in the seasonal hiring period. So we'll add a couple of more to that. But interestingly, our the concession staff with Yosemite Hospitality is actually has more than us, and Weston is going to speak a little later, and he can speak to their staffing. So, like everybody, we're not fully staffed, and we could always use more, but we do the best with what we have.
Thank you. So, again, the idea with this is just kind of talking a little bit about the changes in visitation patterns, the impacts that happened due to COVID-19. And I think that there may be some long-term changes in visitation. So introducing kind of myself, I'm Jonathan Farrington. My primary position is running the Tourism Bureau for Yosemite Mariposa County. So we have exposure to a huge amount of data. One of the things that we saw a significant shift in interest in visitation was typically in the off season, most of our visitation is, an age group of 55 to 65-year-old visitors that are coming from the Bay Area. During the second year in particular, but also saw it in the first year, was a significant shift to 24 to 35-year-olds coming from the LA area. And so I think that created a lot of challenges with visitation, especially with education. So I'm going to ask each of you to quickly just kind of recap what, during the first year of that pandemic, what changes in visitation patterns you saw. And maybe I'll start with Kent, if you could chime in on that.
Sure. It was quite the roller coaster ride the first year. Right as the spring was upon us in March of 2020, and our crowds were ramping up, we ended up closing what we called a soft closure, all California state parks at the end of March. And so what we meant by a soft closure is if you could find your way into a park, we weren't gonna, kick you out or arrest you or do any other thing like that, but the gates weren't open. And so what that turned into is it turned folks away, but it also turned people into parking outside our parks, again, system-wide, and just kind of pushing in. That didn't do us any favors with our neighbors because, neighborhoods, like for example, at Millerton Lake, if you're familiar with the lay of the land, there's plenty of places you could park outside of the park. Not exactly appropriately park, but legally park outside the park and walk in. So one of the things we did right, I think, with state parks is we kept our restroom facilities open. We kept our maintenance folks working, pulling trash, picking up litter, and giving folks a legitimate place to use the restroom facilities because they were still coming. And one example I can give is this South Feingold day use area. We have the entrance to the San Joaquin River Trail, which is kind of a popular regional trail here at Millerton Lake. And on a busy Saturday or Sunday prior to the park closure, we'd maybe have 50 cars up there at the trailhead using that trail. Well, now that COVID had closed so much of our society and people had nothing better to do, we'd probably have 250 cars at a trailhead where we normally had 50 cars. And again, with the park being closed, those cars were parking in the neighborhood. And so really system-wide, that created a lot of issues. I guess I'll continue with my story real briefly. I don't want to hog the horn here, but we did open back up for day use, not camping, but for day use only, which was a huge pressure relief valve for us right prior to Memorial Day weekend. And when we opened up for Memorial Day weekend, the pent up need for outdoor recreation absolutely just blew our minds. And it was the craziest summer that we had ever had. Examples on numbers, for the numbers of people on this, Millerton Lake usually sees about 1 million visitors a year, plus or minus 100,000. Well, even though we were closed better part of March through May, which is 3 of our busiest months, in 2020, we saw 1.1 million people, even though we had 3 months of closure. So basically, we were probably operating at about 150% of visitation when we opened back up.
Well, thank you for that. Jen and Jody, I remember going by Lewis Creek Trail one day and there was so much traffic there that it actually was blocking Highway 49. So I assume that you saw some similar things. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so one of the things that, I'm going to say that nationwide, the Forest Service saw exponential growth with COVID, with the use of the forest due to COVID. Everyone wanted to get outside. Vacations were canceled. Everything was canceled. And so as was, everyone was supposed to stay local. Whether or not people did stay local is another story. But for the most part, people that, say in the Fresno area, who may normally travel somewhere else to for the weekend or to get away, it wasn't advisable. So it wasn't so much that we saw, mass amounts of people from other places. We saw mass amounts of people that are local that are just finding the forest. A lot of people don't realize the difference between the Park Service and the Forest Service. They call us the park, even though we're not. And I'm sure that the park gets something similar, maybe. But the Lewis Creek Trail, yes, the traffic, the human waste issues. We had our bathrooms. We had issues with, as with everyone, okay, how do we maintain bathrooms when, how does this disease spread? So we had to close bathrooms, but we got porta potties in various places, and our campgrounds were closed for a while. Our group campgrounds stayed closed for much longer. because we didn't want there was the moratorium on not gathering more than 10 people for a while there, as you recall. So there was a whole lot of, for recreation management, it was interesting because we didn't have the ability to just close the gates and prevent people from coming in. I'm sure that we were impacted by the state and national parks closing and having more people coming to us. However, I do think that a lot of the impact was that everyone was stuck at home and they knew the outdoors was there, and that, so a lot more people went exploring to the forest that had never been there before. So a lot of our use was based on that. And we continue to see it. We don't have numbers. Again, we don't have an entry point that, we're clicking numbers as people drive by, but, we see the use. The use is not going to go down. Everyone now knows the forest is there. The folks that didn't used to visit the forest, they now are using it much more. And I do expect that recreation is going to continue to have that growth. It was growing before, but it continues.
Right. And appreciate that, because you've actually covered some ground kind of going into the next questions, but I do want to ask Scott the same question. Then I'm going to shift a little bit based on some of the things you said, back to Kent and David on another question. So Scott, any comments on that behavioral change?
Yeah, I think, I agree with everything that's said. And it's interesting because, like the state parks, we were closed, back in 2020, I believe it was March until May. And when we reopened, we did have a temporary reservation system, both in 2020 and 2021. But what's interesting is that we've always had a mix of people coming for the day, from the Central Valley, from the gateway communities, and also people from the United States and international. And so, for someone like me that's been here a long time, in the summer, for example, the international market has just pretty much stopped. 25 to 30% of our visitors are international in the summer. So basically, we saw a lot more people coming in, and as was previously mentioned, also just a lot of interest in getting to the park and getting outside. And I think with the pandemic, we can get into some of the measures we took, but it was just people coming, and we did see a lot of people that were first-time park users, and in talking to them. And so it did bring in, not a different type of visitor, a visitor that maybe didn't have as much knowledge or experience. And so, of course, we did have a little bit of an increase, for example, in search and rescues and some of those issues, because people, sometimes weren't as prepared as other visitors. But at the same time, I think everybody knows, or everybody does know, with Yosemite, it just runs the gamut. So we didn't see a huge change. And as always, everything we do, both in terms of infrastructure, signage, operationally, and also messaging, is, it's all about visitor and employee safety. And so, with the situation, it was just a question of, hey, we want people to come here, have a good park experience. But again, the health and safety of the visitors and the employees is what drove us and continues to drive us as we work through the current situation.
I appreciate that. And I'm going to skip a little bit just because we've covered some of it. And I think, David, you mentioned that you had similar experiences within the Merced River Canyon during those closures. And but I'm going to shift a little bit to make sure we can get some other questions answered. So David, and I'll ask Jen as well. So as far as decisions that were being made to either close or limit access to the areas, can you tell us how and what organizations or what you were looking at, how those decisions were made to either limit access or close down when you had to?
Sure. We in general, the BLM is a much smaller organization than our neighbors upstream. So even before the pandemic, whenever the park closes, whenever Yosemite closes or closes to camping especially, we close our gate because people end up driving up the river canyon and don't know Yosemite is closed. They get all the way to the gate, turn around, and then we're the only place open. And so we just get overwhelmed. And in the summertime, we might have 5 employees. Really, we don't. And in the winter, we have 1. So we just close whenever Yosemite does. So we just follow Yosemite in a lot of ways. There was, in the early months of the pandemic, there was definitely a vacuum as far as guidance from the federal level. Every field office in the BLM was making up their protocols as they went. Just like the forest, we closed bulk toilets and put in porta potties, which made no sense. We didn't allow any BLM employees to work in the field unless they were law enforcement or fire. And I work alone. So it was just a blanket decision. Nobody knew really what to do, what the right thing to do was, and we erred on the side of caution. And then after those first few months, we relied on guidance from the county and the state as far as, our lodging facilities closed or open. So we followed those mandatory closures regarding to camping and closed our campgrounds during those periods. Like the Forest Service, we don't have a lot of gates to close facilities. We're a very porous boundary areas. The Bryceburg Recreation, so we did close that when campground closures were in effect. Other areas just remained open.
Got it. How about for Sierra National Forest?
So I'm gonna take this one as well, because I was here on the forest at the time. So Jen started this past summer. So David hit the nail on the head with how, the toilet situation for the Forest Service, it's very similar to the BLM. We were all in a state of, what does this all mean? Every day there was a new thing that we weren't sure of. So as the decision making, it was coming everywhere from the regional office, or maybe a bit from the WO that was filtered through, or WO is Washington office, excuse me, and through the regional office. And then there were also decisions made on the force. As far as, David mentioned the toilet, closing toilets, it made sense at the time because we didn't know enough about the virus to know if we couldn't access the PPE needed for our employees. We didn't know if, they were going to be infected by this virus, if they were splashed with the cleaning solution from, like what PPE did they need to safely clean a toilet? And we could not put our people in that situation. We contracted out porta potties that would be cleaned, and those companies had the appropriate PPE, etc. PPE is personal protective equipment, so face shields and aprons or smocks or something of that nature. It was very much a every day was a new question without an answer, and so we had to figure out risk. And do risk assessments locally and at the forest level. Excuse me, now you get to meet my toddler. And so it's the decisions came from everywhere. The closing of campgrounds definitely was a regional conversation. The COVID 2 years ago came from what started. We had started 2 years ago with the start of COVID, a weekly call with all of the forests in California. That's our region. And to specifically discuss COVID and what we needed to do for recreation operations. That call has continued every week. We still call and talk, but now we cover all the things. So one silver lining, it's brought our recreation management across California in the Forest Service much closer, and we're a better team for it. So
That's great.
the other thing, sorry, I'm going super long. The
That's right.
CARES Act. We definitely use the CARES Act funding to assist us with everything.
Okay. When we get into the second part of this, we're going to talk about staffing and resources and that a little bit. But Ken, I'd like to shift to you as being a state entity versus a federal. And I'm actually going to combine two questions I have for you just because we've got about 8 more minutes before Dana will talk. So, you know, the decision-making process for state parks, if you could talk about that a little bit. I mean, you know, again, in the beginning, we saw city, county, state parks closing. But so one, maybe talk a little bit about the decision-making and how that affected your parks. But I'm also curious about the impact you saw a little bit more, because you've got cultural heritage sites, you've got historic sites, and then you've got recreation sites. And, you know, again, what that impact was on you.
So understanding state, you know, we are state government. So understanding state government, you have the governor's office, obviously, and then underneath the governor's office, you have different agencies. So our agency is the California State Natural Resources Agency. And in that agency, you have Fish and Wildlife, for example, Cal Fire, state parks. So state parks works directly for the Natural Resources Secretary, who works directly for the governor. So we're very close to decision-making at the top. So as the governor relinquished his guidance, we basically fell in line with his guidance state park system wide. There wasn't a lot of divergence from that. Where we did see any divergence was at the local level. You know, we had to adhere to the state guidance, but if the local health officer had guidance that was more stringent, then we would adhere to the more stringent local health officer guidance. And an example of that would be a local health officer over in Santa Cruz County, for example, was really giving our folks a run for their money because it would be almost a weekly new health order on the Santa Cruz County beaches, and which are very, very busy. And same thing, you're not keeping people off the beach. You can act like you're going to keep people off the beach, but you're not keeping people off the beach. So there would be guidance, for example, that one week you could be on the beach from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., but that's it. And then they'd see how that goes. And then the next week, active recreation only on the beach. Can't sit on the beach. You can't have an umbrella or a beach chair or an ice chest. But if you're actively recreating, you can walk on the beach. And imagine being somebody who wears my uniform and getting to enforce that. You're a real popular with the visiting public. So, you know, the guidance came from, you know, again, pretty close following the governor's guidance, and then it could get more stringent. In our Central Valley District counties, which are the 9 counties kind of around Yosemite, you know, from Tuolumne and Amador all the way down to my neck of the woods, most of that local health officer guidance just kept in line with the governor's guidance, so we weren't into too much chaos there. And then as we gradually started opening things back up, we were asked to reach out to our local health officers and make sure they were in accordance with, you know, for example, if we're going to open camping back up, we needed to get our local health officers kind of blessing, if you will, to open camping back up and so on and so forth. And then as far as the second part of your question, where we really saw, as I think, as a system-wide, and especially in our district, the real demand for parks was in a recreational setting. It was the fact that people needed to get out, get fresh air in their lungs, and spend some time with their families. Our historic sites did get, you know, the visitation back when they opened back up, but where we really got swamped was our recreation areas.
Right. Well, you know, if we see continued temporary reservation systems in the future with the park, I mean, I think part of this whole conversation is how we can, disperse visitation, how we can keep public lands open and potentially extend hours. I think with some of your operations like the Mineral and Mining Museum, it's open 4 days a week. So all leads into a conversation that we can have next. But before we go over to Diana to talk about Recreate Responsibly, I'd like to give Scott, if you could take 3 or 4 minutes and talk about the YOGAT group, which I think, I would love to know more about it too. I mean, it's just how that was formed and how that helped in decision making. That would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, everybody. Yeah, it's interesting to hear from Kent and Jody and the others, kind of the collaborative approach. What YOGAT, the Yosemite Area Gateway Area Coordination Team, long acronym, is basically, we started this, right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's led by the county health officers, Dr. Eric Shevchenko, the Mariposa County Public Health Officer, and then elected officials from each of the counties and public safety folks. And we got together and talked about public health and talked about conditions. And what this did, and still does, we're still doing it, it was basically informing the decision. As we know, going from 20 to 2021, we had the state guidance and CDC guidelines. We had this applied to recreation, us being federal land and state land. And so the idea of YOGAT, and it's still ongoing, is just to a lot of what we're doing today is to compare notes, is to talk about public health guidance. So much of what we did and are still doing in the park is based upon these public health guidelines and the conditions. And so YOGAT still meets, and we have meetings for that. And then out of that, there was a desire to include some of the DMOs, the tourism bureaus and things like that. So from YOGAT, we formed the YOGAT Recreation Task Force. And that is very similar to what we're doing now. It has a lot of the YOGAT members, but it's a collaboration. We have a lot of our federal partners and also a part of YOGAT. I forgot to mention that too. We've got folks from the Forest Service. In fact, a lot of people out in this meeting today from Forest Service, BLM, state parks, really good representatives of the federal land managers, and to talk about the public health conditions. And the Recreation Task Force drills down a little bit more of taking those public health guidelines and the conditions, and then how are those applied specifically to parks and forests and state parks and things like that. So it's been really great. And of course, it's like so much of what we do, what we all do, is the balancing act, is that we want to provide the access to the park, provide the visitation, but of course the health and safety and the conditions are the overarching theme. So YOGAT's been really great, and just really grateful, and we're always happy to be a big part of that. And also the task force in those meetings are ongoing. And again, it's with things changing so much, this collaborative regional approach really helps us inform our decision making. You're still on mute, Jonathan.
Thanks. I wanted to keep the noise from the background. There was, I think, so much decision making that was being discussed and made by that group. And at times, I think initially we weren't really sure how those discussions were being made, but as we learned more about it, it gave us more comfort to know all the people that were involved in making the decisions. So Diana, it sounds like we're ready for your presentation, but it sounds like your delivery is coming in the door. So are you ready to go, or do you need me to stall a little bit and put you towards the end? You're on mute.
It's actually physically coming in my sliding glass door right this minute. So if you want to stall for probably not even 5
I'll
minutes.
tell you what, I will shift.
Ask one more question.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We'll shift a little bit. And so really,
you know what? I think we're going to be ready, because they're just going to snap a picture of this and be out. So we're going to be ready.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, then you actually have the ability to share your screen if you'd like to start your presentation, if you're ready to go.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. You too.
The new world we're living in.
Oh my gosh. And I, you know, from the beginning, I haven't worked from home. I've always gone into the office. I feel your pain, every single one of you that's talking, because when this whole thing started, we actually had county police officers and things like this going out to RV parks and campgrounds and kicking everyone out and telling them to leave. Well, some of those people actually lived in the campgrounds. They didn't have places to go. And when I contacted, you know, the governor's office at one point, somebody said, well, tell them just to go to rest areas. I'm like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. So I do feel your pain. We were super happy to get campgrounds open and at least give people a safe place to go recreate. But today I'm actually representing Recreate Responsibly and the California Coalition. I'll give you a little bit of history about Recreate Responsibly and how they came to be. So obviously, you know, when all this was going on and the shelter in place mandates were in effect, you know, hashtag opt outside, people actually took us seriously and really started going outside to an abundance. So that's when REI sat down with the Outdoor Alliance and really tried to look at some ways to address all of the concerns that you have all shared this morning, as well as looking for opportunities to maybe help correct the situation or provide resources for the situation. And that's really how the National Recreate Responsibly Coalition came to be. And they actually brought together over 1,300 coalition partners. So this included everything from government agencies, private sector businesses, which were really critical for this, and then nonprofit agencies, much like my own here. And they developed a set of 7 principles that were actionable guidelines that really were designed to help people manage themselves in the outdoor space during the pandemic, during COVID. Because there were so many things that were unknown, as many of you had shared, the aim was really to protect people, to kind of foster respect of the outdoors, make sure that everybody felt safe in the outdoors, and then really help to preserve and maintain those the access to those outdoor spaces. Because I know that having worked with parks and Forest Service and BLM, there were a lot of spaces that were, you know, one ranger away from having to close altogether because of staffing shortages and too many people. So Recreate Responsibly, the National Coalition, actually created a toolkit with 7 principles to allow any of the land managers or government agencies, nonprofits to use these 7 principles to kind of message the world and hope to kind of create a little bit better situation in the forest. And then from that, also state coalitions started to pop up. So here we had this national group coming together, but out of that was born these different state coalitions, which were able to kind of target a more regional or local programs and services to kind of help their own state and what was going on. Because as we know, every state was different, and California was super special and, you know, kept things closed for quite a while. Here's the very first 7 principles. And, you know, some of these sound really familiar, right? They're similar to somewhat of Leave No Trace. But if you read through the reasonings to plan ahead and the reasonings to know before you go, it was all really based on COVID and the pandemic and things being closed and needing to be prepared because oftentimes, and me, I'm an avid outdoors person, I'm an avid hiker, but I didn't always know when I was going to go to a place, am I going to be able to get in, you know, and if not, what is your plan B? We have Collins Lake up here, and if you didn't get in line to get on the lake by, you know, 9 o'clock, if you weren't in the park by 9 o'clock, you weren't getting in that day. You know, so many people were trying to get in. So these were really designed to kind of help give people ideas of how to manage themselves during this time in the outdoor space. We added the build in inclusive outdoors, kind of as a, not as an afterthought, but after the original 6 principles were put together, just to make sure that everybody felt safe and everybody felt as though the outdoors were going to be a welcoming place for them. In June of that year, we launched the California Coalition. And we started out with about 150 California-based federal and state land management agencies, nonprofits, user groups, outdoor enthusiasts. We met on a weekly basis to discuss what was happening out there. Were there any outreach efforts? Were there things that we could bring together to help mitigate some of the situation? We were also able to distribute the toolkit and the resources to the California partners and really start working on some ways to mitigate the situation. From there, we developed a mission, which was convene, educate, and amplify, to convene a collaborative, inclusive network of organizations across regions, industries, agencies, et cetera, and to engage a large group of California stakeholders. We want to educate with meaningful, multicultural, multilingual resources to help get people outside safely. And then to amplify the responsible recreation guidance to the largest possible audience across California. You know, and to do that, we needed all of these agencies to help us as well. The vision for the California Coalition is really, you know, to have a future in which recreationists become advocates and caretakers of the outdoor space that we enjoy, and where all identities, abilities, and interests feel informed, they feel safe, and they feel welcome. You know, it's hard to imagine because many of us on this call are in the outdoor space, right? So it's hard to imagine somebody, you know, not knowing about the outdoor space, not knowing where to go. You know, it comes very naturally for a lot of us, but it didn't for a lot of these people that were suddenly finding themselves outdoors. Another piece of our vision is to really instill a sense of personal accountability and understanding on how to preserve, protect, and respect the places that we explore. And then as things moved along, we also had to acknowledge that, you know, Recreate Responsibly was really built during COVID-19. So how are we going to adapt? How are we going to shift? How are we going to continue to get that message out and to adapt the message once COVID-19 went away? Little did we imagine that, you know, 2 years later, we would still be having this conversation. We figured it was 6 months and we would move on to something else, but here we are. Some of our objectives would be to cultivate a hub of information. We do have the national website. We're also working on possibly a California specific website. We want to elevate some best practices and have really actionable steps and provide ongoing opportunities for awareness on the education and recreation issues. We want to really help the coalition grow and expand, and then continue our collaboration with the national coalition. In late 20 and early 2021, we had 38 meetings, 19 steering committee meetings, 46 guest speakers, and this was all done with volunteers. Everybody that's been a part of this has been a volunteer since day one. What's next? Well, the National Coalition continues to develop and release guidelines. During the summer last year, they released the wildfire campaign. And then we also had winter recreation that is available right now. The California Coalition is now in alignment with CalRec Vision, which is the Mammoth Lakes Trails Association. And they do cross-jurisdictional planning processes. And then we'd like to also expand our outreach and communication to really amplify the Recreate Responsibly message. We have reduced our weekly meetings down to monthly meetings, and as people gotten back to normal per se, our meetings have, I don't want to say dwindled, but we have less participation. So now we're at a point where, okay, how do we continue? What messages do we need to put out there, and how can we better serve the land managers? How can we serve all of you with the information that we have available? The group is always, of course, open to new participants. And if you'd like more information or you'd like to join our newsletter, here's the information right here.
Thank you so much, Dana. And if time allows, as we get to the second part of the panel, I'd definitely like to open it up for questions to you. And a number of you have been messaging me asking if these slides or other information will be available. So yeah, we'll definitely do that. And I think for Dana sharing the slides, it's really a snapshot. But a couple of things I just wanted to say about this group and the reason that I asked and reached out to Recreate Responsibly. I generally have really enjoyed going and participating in these meetings. One, I was truly amazed at how many significant leaders joined this group in such a short period of time, but not just joined. The amount of communication and work that was accomplished so quickly, honestly, for a volunteer group was pretty mind-blowing. There was specific messaging for periods, such as, you know, as a DMO, and I would encourage our public land managers that are on this to get involved, because the communications that were created were so professional and so on point that individually, I don't see most organizations being able to create these messages. So this was a unified message developed by land managers, nonprofits, and other people. So like for Memorial Day or Labor Day during the pandemic, there was very specific messaging and creative and assets that could be shared social media or on websites and in general. We talked about the challenges and the issues created by the pandemic with visitation, and these were resources. And so again, limited staff and resources to create those messaging. So the next part of this conversation is really how we're moving forward. You know, and my last question I'll kind of ask first, which is for all of you, is how can we get involved to support these public land managers? So I'll kind of open and close the second session with, how do we support them? You know, how, knowing the limited resources, knowing the limited staffing, funding, you know, what more can we do to do that? So I'd like to start out and ask each of our panelists, so what are each of your biggest challenges today? And David, I'd like to start with you. And again, with that notion of what can the public do to support you? What are your biggest challenges?
We're just kind of used to working on a shoestring budget and getting things done. That Recreate Responsibly, and well, if the public is prepared and knows the situation before they arrive, that's probably the best case scenario. So the BLM has stepped up our website a little bit. There's more information there, and we keep it updated as best we can. I don't really have a good answer. Well, I guess one of our biggest problems was just dealing with trash. I mean, I'm not expecting anybody to help with that necessarily, but just to bring that into the conversation, that was a big issue, I think. And I've heard it from all the other land managers, just the sheer amount of trash was mind-boggling. So if people could just be prepared when they arrive to take care of themselves, really.
Yeah. Well, I would challenge the group to say there's a lot of hiking groups, you know, and certainly if you were to reach out and create a way to do that, that people could go out with a trash bag. Maybe their hike isn't as long, but it could be productive. So,
right. And we do have a few volunteers who just live in the area and walk their dogs and what have you, and they've become, you know, bona fide BLM volunteers, and they pick up trash. I give them a litter gripper, and they've become good resources for us. So
that's great. Jen, how about
if I ask a quick question? For all the land managers, you know, I would oftentimes when I'm creating, and I'm part of the communications team, you know, messages to go out to the consumers, the people that understand it and get the message, they're like us, they're out in the outdoor space. So what do we need to do? And I'd love to hear this from all of you. What do we need to do? What kind of message do I need to send that really reaches those people that aren't, of the outdoor space? How are we going to get through to those people that, to explain to them that if you, don't leave your dog bag. It sounds really simple to all of us, but it's not to them. So what types of things can I do? What types of things can Recreate Responsibly do to help you with that?
Great question and a challenge for involvement. So Jen, I'd like to ask you, so what do you see as your biggest challenges as a forest manager?
So Jody was raising her hand, I think, to answer that question, but I'll answer your question first. I think that our challenge is very similar to that of BLM. We've had a major increase in garbage issues. So really, I just think that this kind of new wave of people that are recreating don't understand the leave no trace principles. So helping us expand that messaging in any way possible is, like the BLM, we have our local groups that are, that are helping us when they can volunteer to pick up garbage, but it tends to be a bigger problem. And really on top of that, of just garbage, it's really kind of mind blowing to me how much we're having to deal with human feces issues in areas. The people that are recreating right now just don't understand how to do so in a way that is not, for lack of a better way to put it, disgusting. So that's where I think we need the most help is, really helping push, the leave no trace type principles and the know before you go. I'll just leave it at that and let Jody jump in.
Yeah, and thanks, Jen, to add to that is to answer the question of how do we do that? Honestly, I think if we had that answer, we'd be doing it. But I think really what it comes down to it is we need more people on the ground to be able to talk to people. We need the ability to educate those folks that are new, reaching out to the non-normal folks that but the thing is, we've always had a trash problem, but generally it's the folks that don't come to the forest frequently that we have a harder time reaching out to and educating. So figuring out how to diversify our message to those folks is really going to be the key. I don't have the answer to that because quite frankly, we don't have the capacity.
Right.
That it's going to take really putting forth that effort as far as going to places that folks, that we don't normally think of, because and even folks that recreate regularly don't realize that they shouldn't burn their trash and they, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of messages out there that we need to add to and just continue to educate.
Got it. I want to just point out, and I think we're going to go to Kent next, is that there's a lot of people in this group, I think, that want to help you. And that's one of the reasons that this conversation, I think, is great to have, because you may not be aware of a lot of the resources that are out there. So Ken, from a state parks perspective, what are your biggest challenges today?
I think I've been in my role for over a decade. I have to just say that it's a constant lag of budgets and staffing. As we get busier, I need more staff, and that's constantly lagging behind. As expenses increase, I need more money, and the budget's constantly lagging behind that. It's really trying to keep up with the times and the increase in visitation, the increase in expenses, the increase in everything. Parks have become that much more of an important thing, I think, to the public, but the budgets typically lag behind that, and staffing lags behind that. And it's just really a weird job market right now, as I think probably a lot of people on this call would agree with. We ask a lot from our least paid people, our seasonal employees that are making, close to minimum wage. And those are some dirty jobs, whether you're that person out picking litter or cleaning these bathrooms that are just torn up, and you're making $15 an hour. Who wants to do that job? It takes a special person. And there are those special people out there, but if it's just a job, you're better off just working around the corner from your house rather than coming out and dealing with that. So we do have a recruitment issue with our seasonals all the way up through our permanent ranks. It's kind of a continuous challenge, but now with this kind of weird social job market challenge that we're all dealing with, it's kind of exacerbated itself.
Yeah. My first job was YACC, making $2.85 an hour. So you have to have a love for public land. Scott, I'm going to shift to you, and maybe you can kind of speak for the group. But what do you feel are the biggest challenges as you're sitting with your group of chiefs in Yosemite today?
Well, I just want to agree with what everybody said. I think there's some really great points, and I think for us it's the challenge both now, in our management team discussions, for example, getting back to normal. We're not going to get back to the way things were. There's the new normal, and so I think for us, it's like all of us, it's communicating the messages of both protecting the resource and providing for a good visitor experience. I think that's what we all want to do. And so preparing the visitor is really critical. And I appreciated a lot of the Recreate Responsibly messages. We are amplifying a lot of those, but it's just one of those things that for example, in Yosemite, as a lot of us know, we have a lot of repeat visitors, but as we've discussed this morning, which has been wonderful, we've got a lot of new visitors. And so it's taking that messaging and just tailoring it, making sure that there's basic stuff that we know leave no trace, and the way that a lot of us that visit not only Yosemite, but national parks and state parks and recreation areas across the country know this stuff. I think that we just have to not take it for granted that people know this. And so it's getting that messaging out. And at the same time, I think it's having the unifying message. And that's one of the real benefits, as I mentioned before, with YOGAT and the Recreation Task Force, is that, coming to Yosemite, we know we've got people, coming through, BLM land, Forest Service land. We're surrounded. We've got a lot of great partners like you and your organization, Visit Yosemite, Madera County, all of them, Tuolumne County. And so I think it's just all of us together and educating the visitors. And I think that as we move into the quote unquote new normal, that's going to be even more incumbent on all of us. I think all of us, certainly want to welcome the visitors, but at the same time, we're in these jobs and we're in this space because we love public lands and feel very strongly about it. And so I think that as we continue to define what the new normal is, keeping in mind the visitor employee safety, protecting the resource, just kind of our core, our core values and our core messages, and communicating them in new ways, effectively, keeping it fresh. All of those things are challenges. And the last thing I'll say is that I'll ask on behalf of the park that we just, all work together on that, as we, continue and look into the spring and summer. I think that we'll be developing messages, and I've already gotten some, great ideas from the Recreation Responsibly, that there's some great stuff there. So it's just getting these messages together, getting them out. And I think that if we kind of take that collective collaborative approach, and we can do our best, that's going to provide the visitors with a good experience and ultimately protect these very special places that many of us on this call are very privileged to be able to work and protect for the American people.
It's a lot of responsibility on all of your shoulders. I appreciate everybody's feedback on that. I did just drop the link into Recreation Responsibility California Coalition, just a link. So if you want to connect to that, I think you'll be impressed with the organizations that have been involved in that. And for the public land managers, many of your regional leadership have been involved in these. But I can say from a Scott, you mentioned the surrounding destination marketing and management organizations, and typically those groups, Tuolumne, Mariposa, Madera, Inyo, Mono, have participated in October. But we are communications groups, and we can help get the message out. Also, there's visitor centers in a number of locations that are available to help with those messages and collateral or things that can be handed out to the public. I saw a message, there's a note from Jen that I thought which was great, which was a lot of people are traveling with kids. You know, maybe the public education, the best way to influence adult behavior is through, you know, their children. Let the children shame the adults for behaving badly. You know, you want to be a good influence on your kids. So I want to just ask each of the land managers if they, and Dana too, if there's, you know, if you have 1 minute, quickly, if you have any closing thoughts. If we have a couple remaining minutes, we'll ask a few questions. I'll just go kind of around the room. Scott, I'll start with you. Is there any closing thought that you have for the group before we move on?
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of great ideas brought forth, and I think again it's just working together, educating the public, and as we navigate what the new normal is, I think that we're all in this together, and just keeping in mind we want to protect these resources, educate the visitors, and do the best we can to educate them before they get to both the park and these other places. And if we work together as we move forward, I think that's going to pay a lot of dividends. So thank you, and thanks to everyone else. This has been a wonderful discussion.
Thank you, Scott. David?
I don't have a whole lot to add. I think that I will go check out the resources there at Recreate Responsibly. We do have several bulletin boards on site. I think that might be appropriate there. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Kent?
I really like where the conversation kind of ended with the importance of educating youth and them taking the message to their families as they come out to the outdoors. I think that's something that we're certainly trying to do with state parks, and I think is possibly a really good route to help some of these problems.
Thank you. Jen?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add except just that it's reassuring to me to see a group this size of people who are interested in this and want to help get together and work on these issues. And so I just see a lot of opportunities for collaboration moving forward, and I'm thankful for meeting with you all today.
We hope you'll come back and join us again. We meet quarterly, and hopefully our next meeting will be a combination of maybe in person and virtual. And then Jody, anything to add?
Yeah, I just on the outreach note, I just wanted to add that it's really important that when we do the messaging, we can tell people the proper way to behave, but until they understand that where they're going to the bathroom, where they're leaving their trash, how that impacts them and their health and where they live, the water, how, what they're doing next to the river or the waterway, etc. Until they understand that what they're doing actually impacts them at home, and the impacts it has on the greater ecosystem, I think that it's really hard to drive that message home. So whatever we do, which it sounds like we're all gonna go, we have a lot of momentum here, but we need to include that in whatever the story is that we're setting out to tell. And thank you all for this. This has been wonderful.
Well, I'll echo that, and I'd like to thank all of our panelists for your time and preparation today. And what makes me really happy is just seeing the number of comments in the chat. They're not all questions or suggestions and requests about ways that people can get involved. So a lot of work went into this, so I'd like to thank everybody's preparation again and being willing to participate. I hope you all found it interesting. I do see that we have 2 or 3 minutes for potential questions. I can't scroll through all of these. So if any of you have a quick question that you'd like to add, I did see one earlier from Bob Asquith. He asked if increasing the number of portable toilets or temporary toilet facilities might help. I think that came in during discussion that it seems like so many people don't know how to poop in the forest and learn from the bears, I guess. But any comments on whether that strategy would work by increasing portables, or if that's not an option? And I'll just open up to any of the panelists to answer that question. I'll pick on Kent.
Well, I think it kind of goes without saying, but it's a challenge that you have to keep them clean, or the public has proven that they will still use the backside of the portable toilet rather than the portable toilet. So you can't just put them out there. You have to maintain them, and that's just part of the package.
Okay. Any comments? There's a lot of comments on how the public might be able to be involved in cleanup. There are organizations that help with that. I think, David, you mentioned that, potentially people could get, cleanup tongs or other equipment. Is that something, I'll ask the visitors centers, is that something that could be provided? Would there be a way to provide equipment at the visitor centers and bags, and potentially would the counties be willing to provide a trash drop-off location, within the area specifically to bring trash back? I know that could open up a big can of worms with the public, using them. I see John going, no way, but just for the sake of conversation.
It's Bob Gardner in Mono County. Jonathan, we've had some real good luck with that. The past year, we, through a concern related to dispersed camping, created a whole effort called Camp Like a Pro, which ended up being quite successful in terms of marketing. But then connected with that whole effort, we did raise money for portable restrooms as well as dumpsters. As Chris noted in the chat, we had adopt a porta potty and adopt a dumpster. Was very successful. We also have a group over on the east side called Sierra Trash Eliminators that is totally volunteer oriented, and they go out and put things on Facebook about what they've collected. And a lot of this has been described very well as a coalition of the willing, where people have stepped up. We've supported the trash eliminators by not charging them at our landfills, and we've had good luck. It isn't perfect. It isn't all done, and we constantly are searching for permanent solutions. But I've been amazed and thrilled at the way volunteers have stepped forward in an overall desire to protect our public lands and make a better effort to educate our visiting public. So those are some ideas. The Camp Like a Pro is online. You can go on to that website and actually see where you can and can't camp on our different public lands. And there's a lot of information there as well. So those are just some ideas.
Yeah, appreciate that. I mean, and we, of course, would need to call it Ken Yeager too for Yosemite Facelift. I mean, there isn't a group that's probably collected more trash. I know during the first part of the pandemic, Kent was out with his group providing materials to pick up along the El Portal and 140 corridor. And at one point, there was a trash dumpster that was supplied at our visitor center from the county, and that pickup equipment was staged at the visitor center, and we got a lot of interaction. So with that, we're at 11:15. It's time to move on to our next subject. So again, I'd like a little round of applause. Thank you to our panelists, and hopefully that first hour and 15 minutes went quickly. And it's just the beginning of continued conversation. So thank you again. So at this point, we're going to shift, and as part of the National Park Service this time, Scott Getteman and I discussed some different ideas of things that would be important to the group, and one that immediately came to the top was the opportunity to introduce the new leader of Yosemite Hospitality, a division of Aramark, the concession in Yosemite National Park. And we have a new leader there who is Weston Spiegel, and I'll just do a quick introduction, and then we're gonna have Weston introduce himself and do an update on areas within the park that are important to all of us that the concession runs. So Yosemite Hospitality is a subsidiary of Aramark, and they appointed Weston Spiegel as Vice President of Operations, overseeing concessions for Yosemite National Park, and that started on May 10th of 2021. Weston has over 15 years of hospitality leadership experience with an emphasis on food and beverage operations. He held senior leadership roles with Walt Disney Company, Starwood Hotels, and Levi Restaurants. Most recently, before coming to Yosemite, he led all of the operations for Bon Appetit at Google in the Bay Area. That is a massive, massive operation, 2,400 people serving over 100,000 meals a day. So he's definitely has a lot of experience with volume and visitation. Weston's a champion of innovation, sustainability, and is passionate about team member morale. And a little bit about Weston: when he's not at work, he can be found spending time with his wife Jessica and 3 young children. And he also enjoys hiking, traveling, and cheering on the Niners. So if you're not a Niners fan, we won't hold that against him. But Weston, I assume you're here, and I'll turn the microphone over to you for the next 15 minutes or so.
Great. Yeah, thank you, John, for that introduction, and appreciate the time. On behalf of the attendees, as I've got the mic now, I will say, yeah, big thanks to the panelists. Fantastic panel. And Jody, you are a rock star, knocking that out with a toddler in hand. So I've locked myself in my home office. You may hear mine screaming at me through the door. But nonetheless, yeah, there's definitely been some changes, some life changes in adapting from our prior home in Silicon Valley and in my role with Google to where we're at now. One of those adjustments is internet bandwidth. So unfortunately, I'm off camera with you today, as my kids also do online class, and we're challenged here. So I'm hoping my audio is coming through clearly. So my prior role was fantastic. I've got to say, it was a special one at Google. However, my family and I were desperate for so much more from a community aspect. And we found that the community we were in search of here in Yosemite. And this role definitely continues to fulfill the scale and the complexity that I desire in my work. So really happy to be here. I have removed Aramark from our lexicon. I report into Aramark. However, my team here in the operation we lead is done so by Yosemite Hospitality and solely dedicated to Yosemite. We are YH. You'll hear me refer to us as YH for short. Leadership team that leads out of care and concern for our team members and community, and whose decision criteria is rooted in what's in the best interest of the park. Okay. I did want to provide a few updates on our operations, as we've all been juggling significant challenges over the last, goodness, 20 months now. And I came into the middle of the pandemic as well here in my new role. I'm extremely proud that Valley Floor shuttle service was reactivated as of December 17th, after roughly 20 months of suspended service. So this was a work stream in transportation that contained roughly 100 full-time employees for us pre-pandemic, and was reduced to 5. So we are rebuilding that. I'm sure everyone is aware that there is a nationwide shortage of what is referred to as CDL drivers, the classification needed for public transit. So this was a heavy lift by my team, and super excited to begin to reintroduce transportation with the start of the Valley Floor Shuttle service here. We will continue to increase transportation operations this spring and summer with the return of the Valley Floor Tour, a bus to Tuolumne, and a Tuolumne shuttle as well. Switching gears slightly, Badger Pass. I was able to see that operate for my first time. Very excited for Badger Pass to be open and operating, as well as our Nordic operations and the famed Curry Ice Rink, all opening in early to mid-December. We're continuing to work towards normalizing operations over the next quarter. You will see this continue. So some of those items will be tableside service returning to the Ahwahnee dining room in place of the current buffet experience. Valet car service at Ahwahnee returning as well, amongst others. So we have our executive chef at the Ahwahnee, Julie Pico, is a fantastic talent. She has recently rolled out a refreshed bar menu. If you haven't given it a try, please come do. And she is aggressively working on an exciting and phenomenal a la carte menu. And item to note here, Chef Julie is the second female executive chef in the Ahwahnee Hotel's 95-year history. Additionally, our mountain room at Yosemite Valley Lodge will be opening in the next quarter, as well as the Curry Village Pavilion, along with the famed Jenny's Ice Cream there. And we are working on a concept refresh at Base Camp Eatery, which is over at Yosemite Valley Lodge. Trio of concepts anticipated there, consisting of poke, Mediterranean, and fried chicken sandwiches. Looking towards the spring and summer, I'm excited to see our High Sierra camps in operation, as well as White Wolf and Tuolumne Meadows Lodge reopening. Next, I'm sorry, if you can go to the next slide, please. We have a significant focus on stewardship, and this is anchored by our environmental initiatives. You can see some of the efforts and programs we've been supporting for some time on this slide. I'd like to tease out that you will be seeing a press release in the very near future around the expansion of electric vehicle charging stations in the park. And YH is very happy to be supporting these efforts along with some other fantastic partners. I'll also share with you a commitment that we have made to removing all single-use plastic bottles from our operation, and anticipate accomplishing that by mid-year here. So very near future. Go to the next slide, please. If you weren't aware, we completed a significant renovation of the Wawona Hotel prior to reopening this past summer. This included the dining room, lobby, and all 104 guest rooms. And if we can get into the next slide. Continuing with renovations, we also did in excess of a $12 million renovation at Curry Village, expanding deck seating, increased bar seating, and food operations, and food options, as well as efficient ordering from 7 Tents Pavilion, with a focus on signage and maps, teaching visitors about the Curry family and the history of Yosemite. And then, of course, we've got the paved gen tiles to help produce energy as a fun way for guests to have power in their footsteps as they enter the pavilion there. So that is about it for me, Jonathan. I sincerely appreciate the time. I'm humbled to be a part of this group and community. Thanks again for the invite.
Well, we appreciate you making time, and Weston and I met maybe a month and a half ago and had a nice hour-long conversation. I really appreciate you sharing your vision, and I think you're a strong leader that's needed during strong and important times. And on behalf of the entire Gateway region, we welcome you in your position and look forward to seeing the work you and your team can produce and supporting our visitors here to the region. So at this point, we will allow MPS to get ready to do the shift. So if Weston, you're willing, is to take a question or two. Does anybody have a question or two for Weston as we shift over to the next presentation?
I do see one in the chat, Jonathan. I know it's been a hot topic around live meetings. So we are. I've got some optimism there. Obviously, we all struggle with this, what I've coined the Corona coaster and the ebbs and flows of this virus. But I am optimistic that we will be returning to live group events. This will be a slow roll, if you will, and we are working in lockstep with local health experts and our MPS partner. But I think here in the spring, we will be returning and offering group events. So more to come there in detail.
We had a question on High Sierra camps. I think it was a bullet, but I'm not sure if you had a point to make on High Sierra, if those would be reopening at some point in the future.
Absolutely. We have our plans and we're going through we're finalizing our spring and summer operating plans as I speak. We're fully committed to opening the High Sierra camps for this upcoming season.
Okay, great. Another question, are there any plans to bring back hikers bus and Tuolumne shuttle?
Yes, that is a hot topic, and I think especially even more so this upcoming season with the Glacier Point closure. So our transportation department, which thankfully I'm very excited to share, we just hired a director of that department 2 weeks ago, so he'll be making his way into the park. But we are planning to operate the bus to Tuolumne as well as the shuttle up in Tuolumne.
Perfect. And will the store reopen?
Store will be open as well as the post office. The grill, though, most likely will not be open with that campground closure.
Okay. And actually, I can answer this for Steve, because Mariposa Grove, I think the rehab of the comfort station and things are slated for, I think the desire is to reopen right around or close to Memorial Day. Scott, is that still? Yep, thumbs up from Scott. So
Our plan, yeah.
Yeah, okay, right.
Famous word, right? Famous
yeah,
word.
I mean, I think the only reason that we could hope that it wouldn't be is because there's still 5 feet of snow on it, right?
Yeah.
That might be a good thing. So I guess last question before we move on is Backpackers Campground in Tuolumne Meadows.
I'll take that. This is David.
Dave. Oh, thank you, David.
Yeah, this is David. I'm the Chief of Business and Revenue Management for the Park Service here in Yosemite. That, as the rest of Tuolumne Meadows Campground is going to be closed, the Backpackers Campground will also be closed there.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to officially turn the podium and microphone over to Scott. Thanks for letting me talk at all of you today. I appreciate it, and looking forward to the Park Service presentation. And back to Jeff in case you wanted to say anything first.
Thank you to all the panelists, and thank you to Jonathan for putting that together. So I'm going to quickly hand off the baton to Scott and let him take us to the final hour. So Scott, welcome, and Cicely and all the staff from the Yosemite National Park.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, everyone. And before we go, I just wanted to kind of amplify what Jeff said at the beginning about Jonathan pulling the earlier presentation together. I thought it was really great, and some great speakers, and you really rallied Jonathan some great information. So thank you, and it was a pleasure, and I think a lot of good information that came out of that. So excellent work, and we appreciate it. It's great to be with everyone virtually, of course, but great to see a lot of faces. What we're going to do for our part, we kind of have a 3-part approach. The first thing we're going to do is talk a little bit about the traffic pilot program that we had last year. For folks that remember that, we had a change in the traffic pattern, learned a lot. So we're Very honored to have Elijah Henley from Federal Highway is going to join us, and he's going to give us a short presentation about the traffic pilot and what we can expect this year. After Elijah talks, I'm going to introduce Cicely Muldoon, our park superintendent. Cicely's going to give several updates and talk about what is going on and some things we're looking at as we transition into the spring and summer. And then we'll do a Q&A as we normally do. And my colleague Ephraim Dixon is on, and he'll be monitoring the chat. So as we normally do, and I know there's a few first timers on, and welcome, is we ask that questions for both Elijah and also for Cicely and the staff, if you just put them in the chat. And then after Cicely talks, we'll have Ephraim pull out some questions. I do want to mention quickly before I forget, we will get a lot of questions and we won't have time to answer all of them, but please know that we are recording the, writing them down, and well, it's being recorded, but we are recording the questions and keeping a log of them. So we won't be able to get to everybody, but we will certainly endeavor to answer as many questions. And David Miyako jumped in, and we have our chief ranger, our chief of resources. We have several members of the Yosemite management team on. So when questions come in, either Cicely can answer or the appropriate staff members. So it's again great to be here, and I'm going to hand it over to our great partner, Elijah Henley with Federal Highways. And Elijah and his team have been doing an incredible job on the traffic pilot and some really great stuff. So take it away, Elijah.
Thanks a bunch, Scott. And thanks everyone for the opportunity to present to you today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see, which one is this? Is screen 2. All right, yeah, let's share that. And get over to, so what I'm going to use to present today, there's a ton of information here on this study. This is a kind of a culmination of 3 years worth of work. We just finalized the study. And so what I'm going to do is really hit the high notes here, but I just want to say, I talked to Scott before we got together today, and we're going to make this link to this storyboard map that I'm going to use to facilitate my presentation will be made available on Yosemite's website. We also worked through the logistics of making the full detailed report also available. It's quite a big document, but for those that are interested in really getting more into the details of how we did the work that we did, we have a full comprehensive report that covers it. So today I'm really just here to try to hit the highlights, and then we'll try to answer any other questions that generates. So this storyboard here, and can everyone see my screen? Thumbs up on that. You see the screen? Okay, great. So this is that storyboard. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the background section here, because I think obviously everyone on this call has a really good familiarity, testimonial, how bad the traffic is here, and kind of general background on Yosemite and the road system that feeds the valley is kind of the first section of this story map and the first section of our report. Again, schematic of just showing really here just how all the traffic is funneled in on Southside Drive as they come in. And then when everyone exits the park, they're pushed out on Northside Drive. So once it fills up with parking and gets filled, it just is very, very problematic. Very long delays as parking fills, and then particularly when everyone leaves at the same time at the end of the day. So really, that was kind of what we were facing. There's a video as part of the web map that shows just kind of how bad it can get. This is from summer of 2017, which is really a tough year. So there's a lot of detailed information there that I think everyone on as part of this is probably in their own way, probably experienced just how bad traffic can get. And just the kind of the existing conditions piece of this is, kind of recognition that it used to be that it was worse on the weekends. You could sneak away and get in there during the week and it was okay. We're really seeing that congestion is happening more chronically throughout the entire week. And similarly, as it relates to a season, it used to be really that kind of Memorial Day to Labor Day. We've really seen now those shoulder seasons, both up into the spring and then into the fall. That expansion of the congested conditions is really expanding, not just during the week, but also kind of expanding more chronically throughout the duration of the year. And on a daily basis, in the really busy times, you're really congested throughout that whole area, really from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. when the park finally empties from the day. So yeah, so those are kind of those current conditions that we were dealing with here. And then as it relates to process, what we did is used a very standard traffic transportation planning tool, a traffic microsimulation. Basically, we just built a virtual version of the whole network in Yosemite and filled in with the right traffic and turn movement information to kind of replicate how bad traffic is when it's really bad. And then I'll just keep sliding through this this kind of thing. Then we went through a process. Again, that first stage there to finding the problem really was about getting the model set up to replicate chronically congested conditions. And then the next phase of the work dealt with identifying specific bottlenecks and then identifying independent solutions, modeling just independent solutions first to see how well they perform in relation to each other. And then we went through a series of scenarios with the park to kind of look at different combinations of individual solutions to come up then with the package of kind of final recommendations of things that we put forward for the park to consider. And then the exciting part of the project, which we were not anticipating going into it, was it looked like the model really performed so well. And so the things that we set up in our scenario planning that we decided, hey, can we mobilize an effort to then try to test it, see how well it would work in real time versus what the model was doing. So that's kind of what we ended up able to do, was to actually do that pilot program last season. It went unbelievably well. We were really, really excited to see just how well the model predicted how well the solutions would perform. And then when we tested them, they performed as well as the model said they would. So that was kind of cool. So just clicking through here, this represents what we in our work kind of identified in the system as the three key bottlenecks. The Yosemite Falls crosswalk was one, then the Curry four-way was the other, and then lastly the intersection of Southside Drive and Sentinel Drive. Those were where snags in the system, that's where places were coming and people were trying to figure out which ways to go. And then as traffic kept coming, that's where all the big backups were. So that was really, those three bottlenecks were kind of the focus of our work. See here, this will start to go, the recommended solutions. And this just goes through where we are. Basically, this is the first one. The first one was at basically making here a 2-lane at the Falls crosswalk, increasing the capacity and going from 2-lane bidirectional to 2-lane one-way to help the park empty at the end of the day. And so that really cleared some of the queuing we were seeing. And then the second intersection, this should be, was it the Curry four-way here we go, is basically locking off that one leg of the four-way intersection and creating this continuous flow T, so that people, when they come in, have to make that choice to go right further into Curry Village, or to go exit the park and work toward the way out. And so instead of having a lot of backup here, this intersection now flowed continuously, so backups were eliminated. And then moving around the Southside Drive, a similar thing here where we created this contraflow kind of configuration that again eliminated a two-way stop here, and just gives the visitor two options as they're coming in. Either they take a left to exit the park because they don't want to go further into the valley, or they stay in the right-hand lane to then go into further into the valley. And then that's on the other side of Sentinel Drive. On Northside Drive, it connects, kind of continue with the same circulation pattern. As folks are coming and starting to exit the park, in instances where they weren't able to find parking and they want to keep looking for parking, they're able to be in the left-hand lane and recirculate around. Or if they're ready to exit, then they have the one lane to go out of the park. So in effect, when you take all these solutions into account, we got this nifty little slider here. This is how bad was on a bad day. And after we implemented those solutions, or once we modeled those solutions that I just showed you, basically this is the result. It effectively eliminated congestion altogether. You see the small little residual queuing that happens at our 3 bottlenecks, but significantly reduced. And what we really showed at a maximum congested level at a high peak day with these solutions implemented, we could restore the valley to effectively free flow conditions. So we were so excited with that. We said, well, gosh, this isn't going to take that much money relatively to go and test this to see how well it works. So that was kind of the next phase. So last year we mobilized an additional task order with the consultant team. We effectively knew all we needed to do to test this was to acquire temporary barriers and redo the striping on the road, and we could test this out and see how well it performs. So that's effectively what we did. And I think, hold on, let me get this. You know what? For the sake of time, I'll go through. There's a whole series. If you guys go to the web map in this section, there's a little slide that shows kind of the configuration for the continuous flow, the flow T at Curry, and then the count contraflow and all that, and just kind of shows what we did and set up as part of the pilot. And it also shows that what we found is, as I think I already indicated, when we went out and got everything set up and we evaluated the observed improvements of implementing those solutions compared to what the model results were, the model very much predicted the performance that we could anticipate, and we were able to validate that. So that we were very pleased to be able to work that through and really test it, because you don't want to invest the millions of dollars you would need to make solutions permanent by the summer of 2023. So by the summer season in 2023, we will have the Valley network permanently reconfigured based on what I presented here today. So that, I believe, in the last little bit here is just showing, really, I just iterate, it's been one of the biggest pleasures of my career, just the collaboration, cooperation, inclusion of everyone who had ideas and everyone that has experienced the problems we're trying to solve. And you can see down here with my agency, Federal Highway Administration, of course, the park, both a park, Yosemite National Park, but also the Pacific West region, who are great partners with us, and and then across the board, the Volpe Center really helped on the transit. I didn't touch a lot about that, but we also looked at, with the reconfiguration of the network, we also had to look at reconfiguring the current transit network. So they were a great part of that. The Conservancy was there all the way and continues to be, and then Atkins and Ostrom Solutions, they were our 2 consultant teams that were part of this whole thing. So really a great effort. And Scott, then I think I about hit 10 minutes. I am done.
Great. Thank you, Elijah, and really well done. And I saw Ephraim drop the link to the storyboard in the chat, and then we're going to get more up on our website. So thank you to Elijah, and thank you to our partners. Really great stuff, and working towards, we keep going to the free flowing traffic. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Cicely Muldoon, the park superintendent. And Cicely's going to provide some updates and give some, So I'll just turn it over to Cicely.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks everybody for hanging in there. I know how tired we all are of these virtual meetings, so way to hang in for these 2 hours. We don't have that much time left, so I will try not to talk too fast, because there's a number of things I'd like to talk to you all about, but we always like to leave as much time as we can for questions. So I'm just going to jump right in. Like everyone, we are dealing with the Omicron variant here, which is affecting our community just like it is everywhere else. So far, fingers crossed, we have not had to close any operations due to this, due to losing staff to the virus. So we're happy to be hanging in there so far. In fact, Yosemite, as a large park in the nation, has done better than most of our colleagues in managing for the virus here. And that, I think, is thanks in large part to our great community partnership. So a shout out to all of our surrounding counties for all they've done to help us with that, and our colleagues and our adjacent land managers. We're very excited at the many services that Yosemite Hospitality is going to be able to bring back this summer. Although we've said many times, and I believe it to the bottom of my heart, we're entering into a new normal in this country, but we're going to get back a lot of the services that we're used to providing to visitors in Yosemite this coming summer. So I think that is terrific. And Weston has been just a pleasure to deal with, as I'm sure those of you who have had the pleasure to do that know. We're kind of in a new era, I hope. As you all know, it was a hugely busy holiday season with those big storms, and the park was incredibly busy if you made it in to see the magic that is Yosemite Valley in a fresh snowstorm. I think I've never heard the radio as busy as that, though. While this crowd knows how to drive in the snow, many, many, many visitors do not. So we had a ton of motor vehicle accidents and slips and falls, and medical transports. It's between our facilities staff, which is down by about 33%, and our ranger crew, they were working full time. So I know some of the roads were slower to open than some of you wanted, but they were working at full tilt, and we're grateful for them. So a couple of things that are not pleasant to talk about. We've had two really unexpected closures because of some really serious emerging safety issues. The first one is the fort, which is kind of our own Park Service lingo, and probably you folks don't know what that is, but the fort is what we refer to as that huge facility in Yosemite Valley that is next to the stables that houses a number of amazingly critical functions. It's really the operational hub of the valley. We have our structural fire equipment in there, many emergency services, the roads equipment, trails, buildings, grounds. It's where the jail is. We've been in the process of this building was built in the 30s, so you can imagine the kind of shape it's in. It's been modified over the years. So we've been assessing the building for structural and other concerns since late this summer, and have found enough issues to cause us really serious concern, to the point of where we evacuated all the staff and have even changed the locks on the buildings because of an emergent issue around asbestos. It was extremely difficult, asbestos and electrical and seismic and a number of other things, but the asbestos was the one that really caused us to close the doors on it. Very difficult timing as we're going into winter, and then we need that heavy equipment to have protection. So that's caused us to really shift operations, move some of that stuff down to El Portal, which slows some of our response times, but there was really no way around it. So we are in the midst of working on both short and long-term solutions to how we deal with, if the fort can be rehabilitated over the long term, if we need to look at something new in the place of that. We don't know that yet, but we're working with a team of professionals from our Denver Service Center to help us with that. So just in case you're wondering what's going on, that's been kind of high drama for operationally for us here in the Valley. Most unfortunately, we've had a similar emergency situation that I'm sure you've all become aware of related to the El Portal trailer court. In December, we had to let the trailer court residents know that the housing agreements were going to come to an end. This was really hard, and we didn't reach this decision lightly. The trailer court residents really have long been a part of the community here, and the hardship that comes with finding new housing, particularly in this area, is not to be taken lightly in any way. But what we found was a really serious threat from the incredibly deteriorated electrical distribution system, to the point of we were concerned that the place could burn down, or a great risk of electrical shock. Over many years, we've really been managing the trailer park by attrition, because the Merced River plan has had a different future for that area. It will be non-residential, but we were just getting there very slowly. But the emergence of this really critical safety issue, first from our utility staff, and then we verified it with an outside consultant. And then we also talked to PG&E about it, really identified that we couldn't wait on this. So let me say, Rosemary, I see you on the call here today. Thank you very much to Mariposa County. We've been working with the county to provide some assistance to those residents who will be displaced. And thank you also to Yosemite Hospitality. The great majority of the residents there are Yosemite Hospitality employees, and Weston's making housing available for all those folks being displaced who are employed by the company. who are being displaced from the trailer court. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. I'm going to run through a few more things and then happy to answer questions. We're just a month out from Horsetail Falls season. I think it's going to be a big one this year based on the snow we've had. So we're going to reenact sort of the closure and the traffic patterns that we've had over the past couple of years. We're anticipating that being from February 10th to the 28th. We are not enacting a reservation system for that this year. Last year, we were in a surge, as we are right now, really, but last year we were pre-vaccine and pre-booster, so we are not going to have a reservation system for Horsetail Falls. We thank Yosemite Conservancy. I don't know if you're on the phone today, but it's going to be an all hands on deck thing. We're calling in some volunteers to help us manage what we anticipate is going to be a crush of folks coming to enjoy that. So a little bit of fire season discussion. We have coming up in partnership, a great partnership, another Rosemary, let me give you credit for this one too. Great partnership with the Mariposa County Resource Conservation District. We have about an $8 million grant that came from the California Climate Investment Program through CAL FIRE and the Wildlife Conservation Board. With this money, we're going to be thinning and removing dead and down biomass in about 3,600 acres in and around Yosemite Valley and Wawona, and Yosemite West, and the Merced Grove and the Mariposa Grove and the Wawona Road and the Big Oak Flat Road. Big projects going on. This is really a project designed to help protect the communities and protect the giant sequoia groves from the high severity fire that we see these days. It'll make future prescribed fires safer for our firefighters who are working hard to protect those incredibly precious resources of the giant sequoias. And it'll do some work towards restoring Yosemite Valley meadows and restoring historic scenic vistas and make the whole sense of arrival to Yosemite a better experience, we hope. This, of course, comes, as does every project here, I'm afraid, with traffic delays. So we're anticipating traffic delays of up to 15 minutes for that work on the roads. So the good news, talking about the summer ahead, the good news is that we competed extremely well at Yosemite for Great American Outdoor Projects. And the bad news is that we competed extremely well at Yosemite for Great American Outdoor Projects. This summer, as I think we mentioned on the last call, is just going to be a crazy construction season in Yosemite like we have never seen before. Bring your hard hats. So let me just remind you folks, I think we talked about this last time, but what's going on in the park this summer. So in the high country, Glacier Point Road will be closed for the season for repaving. Bridal Veil Campground will be closed. A new water distribution system being put in there. Mariposa Grove will be repaired and reopened, we hope, by Memorial Day. Tuolumne Meadows and Crane Flat campgrounds will be completely closed for the season for total rehab, and there will be continued some traffic delays with the ongoing road work that was going on last summer on the Tioga Pass Road. In the Valley, the final season of work on the Bridal Veil Trails project is underway. This is going to be a fantastic project, really. It's going to be like, you all remember what Yosemite Falls be, and then what the transformed Yosemite Falls Trail was like. This is what Bridal Veil Falls will be. Thanks again to our Yosemite Conservancy partners. So the end result will be great, but it will cause traffic delays as you're coming into the valley this summer. And at long last, we are starting work on the new Welcome Center, where the old sports shop used to be. That will be a great project when completed. It'll bring a nice sense of arrival to the valley, and particularly since the valley is very confusing to people who don't come here all the time, it's going to make much more sense for circulation and transportation. Bad news is that it's going to take out about 300 parking places this summer in the valley, and we all know how precious every single parking place is here. So not going to be easy. We're super grateful to be bringing that traffic pilot back. It's rare that a project is modeled in a certain way and then matches that model perfectly. So that, while it doesn't solve our problem, of course, our decades-old problem of congestion, it moves the fulcrum a little bit and improves things over the summer. So we're super encouraged about that. And I have to say, we're also considering reservation system options for the summer. We don't want to return to the gridlock that used to be or the terrible visitor experience. So we're really taking a hard look at all these construction projects, what it's going to mean for traffic and parking, and trying to figure out how to have a good visitor experience. We've been evaluating how our system worked the last two seasons. We are not anticipating bringing back a system based on COVID, and that's possibly very optimistic on our part, considering where we are right now. But I like to think we're shifting past that, but we will have problems this coming year with all that construction I just mentioned. So we are working hard on some analysis of this right now. We're going to circle back to this group as soon as we possibly can, I hope within a month, about what we think might work going forward. So please stay tuned on that. I don't have many details yet. What we want to do is accommodate as many people as we possibly can without causing gridlock in the valley and other places in the park. I understand you all need to know what's coming as soon as possible, as we all do, as we plan for the summer and bring on our teams. And again, we will circle back with you as soon as possible. And some of you on the call I've been IMing already. Let's expect some calls very shortly. Let's talk some more about this. We are incorporating all the thinking we've had from many of you over the past 2 seasons about what worked well and what worked poorly as we think about this. So let me just close with something cool as a teaser for a future YGP. Yosemite's been collaborating with Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park and the Forest Service to learn about fishers on our lands and how we protect these animals and their habitat. These fishers, you probably all know, are pretty tough customers, sort of these mid-sized carnivores that live in Yosemite's forests at about 8,500 feet. It's a federally endangered species and is at risk of extinction from habitat loss and wildfire and tree mortality in the southern Sierra Nevada. There are maybe between 100 and 500 fishers left in the southern Sierra. And we have way cool, if I do say so myself, a research project going on how many fishers live here and how they're using the landscape, particularly in relation to prescribed fires and wildland fires. So I'm going to propose, Jeff, that we bring this topic back with the biologist to talk about it at the next YGP, because it's a really interesting project. And I think I want to close to leave, oh boy, we're close to the end, to leave some time for comments. So thanks. Sorry for the fast talking.
All right,
Thank you,
good morning,
Cicely.
everyone.
Yeah, go ahead, Ephraim.
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah.
We have a few questions online. Again, just a reminder, if you have some questions, go ahead and pop them into the chat. Elijah, if you're still on, the first questions were revolving around the traffic study, and really referring to, if you could just talk just a little bit about how last year was the reservation system in place and how that relates to a regular season.
Yeah, so I put that in, but thanks for that, Ephraim. I'll just reiterate what I put in the text. So we acknowledge that, so demand was less than normal because of the day use reservation system. However, right after Labor Day, I believe, I can't remember the dates exactly, they lifted the day use reservation, and we had about 2 or 3 weeks where it was unconstrained full access, no reservation system, and the pilot performed. Was able to absorb that additional unrestricted demand. That having been said, there's absolutely a point where you pump enough volume into the system, it'll break again and it'll break down. We have some figures on where we anticipate those numbers to be, and we'll continue to work with the park as it relates to next season and evaluating. There's another question in there about the parking spaces that will be removed, and how will that be dealt with? And I don't have an immediate answer to that, but I think that's something we can analyze and try to anticipate as best we can. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. There's another question. This one, David, perhaps you can answer. Jessica was asking about the closure of the backpacker camp at 12 Meadows, and what's our plan for this in the coming summer?
Yeah, so like Cicely mentioned, the entire campground is going to be closed for construction. We recognize that there isn't necessarily a good spot for the backpackers campground. The project manager that was looking at this looked at all the different angles, and we just could not find a good spot in Tuolumne to accommodate the backpackers campground while it's under construction. And we also recognize that people are going to end up going into the valley and potentially White Wolf. For that need.
All right, thank you. Next question would be for Kathleen Morse, who's a division chief for strategic planning and project management Scott Gurman is asking about, did we reconsider the approach towards Tuolumne Campground project, perhaps having at least half or a portion of the campground open and available, as opposed to closing the whole thing at the same time as the Glacier Point Road being open?
Yeah, hi, everybody. This is Kathleen. We looked at all options, and really when you're talking about giving a contractor an area to stage in and to operate in and to basically house their employees, we run into safety considerations and liability considerations, and it just becomes infeasible to segment out the campground area. It was far better to just give them the entire space to manage as their own. So unfortunately, that doesn't mean the campground in its entirety will be closed, but that's the safest and most responsible way to carry out the work at hand.
All right, thank you, Kathleen. Jacob Hawley is asking, maybe this for you, David, will the Park Service be able to provide a Mariposa Visitor Center with a ranger to help with information this summer?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. We would very much like to do that. We are striving to staff the Gateway Visitor Centers, not just Mariposa, but other gateways as well. However, as Lee mentioned, even that we are exploring options for a day use reservation system, our first priority is to staff the entrance stations and the campgrounds first, and then we will be evaluating the feasibility of Gateway Visitor Centers after that.
Thank you. And last question, or there's no one coming in. Karen, are there plans to have the park provide portable toilets adjacent to 41 at Goat Meadow, Mount Raymond Road? By the time folks get to that point, the visitors have been in their cars for almost 2 hours since going through fish camp.
So,
Barney with us or not?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I believe you're referring to outside of the park, that Sierra National Forest, I believe, but I guess maybe a little clarification on that.
Yeah, this is Barney. I'm not aware that we've ever put porta potties there. I'd have to check into it.
Yeah, we'll look into it. And again, I think with the restroom at the south entrance, of course, right there is real busy, and then with Mariposa Grove, and as we mentioned, we're working real hard to get the Mariposa Grove open. But we're going to explore this and the restroom situation as we get into the planning. All right. Well, are we good, Ephraim? I think we're kind of wrapped up on time, but again, just thank you to Cicely and thank you to everybody. This has been a great meeting. We'll watch the chat. If you have any further questions, go put them in the chat. And again, we're going to be recording all of them. So thank you. Thank you again to Jeff and YGP and Jonathan and everybody. This was a great meeting. So I'd like to just turn it back over to Jeff to close us out, and thank you.
Great, thank you, appreciate it, Scott, and special thank you to Cicely Muldoon and your staff being available to be a part of our quarterly meeting. And special thank you, as Scott did, for Jonathan and putting together that program where we had Kent, Jody, Jennifer, David, Diana, Weston, and Scott all a part of that. Very much appreciated. I think it was an outstanding presentation all around for the last just over 2 hours. So appreciate everybody that has been a part of that, and thank you for those that are participating. We are hopeful, and I may have done that incorrectly. I was trying to do too much at one time. I think it's the second Thursday of the month that we have the quarterly meeting, so it's not April 21st. I have that correct. It would be actually April 14th. So April 14th is a quarterly meeting next. Fingers crossed that it will be a hybrid, that we'll be able to have Weston open up the room there, that we can be able to at least maybe have some kind of hybrid presentation for our quarterly meeting. So we do appreciate everybody over the last few months of us having to do this all on Zoom. So very much appreciate your patience on that. Again, thank you very much for coming. I hope everybody has a wonderful Thursday and Friday and their weekend, and we wish everyone well. And thank you for joining us for the Yosemite Gateway Partners quarterly meeting. meeting with our special partner, Yosemite National Park, and Cicely and her staff. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.